So, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't have any comments or anything to add.
Just I wasn't there, so to,
To be an abstention.
yeah.
Any comments, proposed changes, modifications other than updating, I guess, attendance? Okay. Vote to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 301. Okay. Lindsay's going to regale us with her Bart impressions.
Suppose you could say that.
So yeah, I think a few things have happened, since our last meeting. There's been some, potential discussion and action by the town, both to purchase the Creighton Street property, kind of adjacent to Schanda Park and the Creighton Street pump station, and also to formally establish the coastal resilience incentive zone that we've been talking about for the last couple months as well. So I think that's a little bit of a lead in.
Yeah, so we can go with the Creighton Street property update first. Yes, town council approved the purchase of that property, using available funds from the recreation, capital reserve. So we have a purchase and sale agreement. We're going through the process of doing the necessary steps to be ready to closing. The environmental assessment is in progress, may be complete. And with that, then next steps will be going ahead with the process of closing on the purchase. And that should be happening within the next month or so. And then in addition to purchasing the property, we have some internal discussions with stakeholders to start discussing potential plans and use for the property and how to proceed with incorporating that into Schanda Park and the Creighton Street pump station and all that kind of stuff. So Bart just set that meeting for November 12th. So that'll be primarily town manager, director of environmental services, other department heads that are involved, the rec director, public works director, myself and Bart, and town manager, and then representatives from conservation and Sam as a representative for the Riverfront Committee. So I guess that's all I have to update. I'll answer questions if there are questions, but I think more to come once we have that meeting in November and have more discussion about timing of closing and what to do.
So,
They do have something.
yeah.
Hope you can carry this forward. So this, I don't know, kind of some thoughts, I think, on some of the people on the town council as to partitioning that property and selling off the house or whatever. Okay. My personal preference would be that we keep it and see how we can utilize it for recreation purposes or whatever.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was any thought of subdivision or if basically no one really actually knows yet because we just got there.
It's kind of a consideration, subdivision and potential consolidation, or maybe a lot line adjustment is how it could go forward, so that the house could be resold to offset some of the funds that were used and kind of replenish the recreational department funds. So that's an opportunity that avenue that we could take. We're also considering just keeping the property as a whole and repurposing the house for additional town use. So that's part of that discussion that will come up in November.
Just out of curiosity, Lindsay, what could a house be repurposed for besides a dwelling? Would you have to That would be,
I don't know specifically. I think some general ideas are potential art studio space or some recreational programming. Amy's definitely thrown out, I don't think she's been shy about it, that it could be used for like kayak storage or some additional recreational storage that we would need for the park area. So it could be repurposed for recreational use that's not necessarily exclusive to residential dwelling.
I personally think that it would be kind of a shame if we jump right in and sell it off and then at a later point in time say, gee, we really could have used that for such and such and such and such. It's just my personal thought.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair and makes sense for what we have in that conversation, or just for the town in general, of like, even if that's ultimately where you end up, maybe like, wait a minute, and just think about if you want the asset before you subdivide and sell it back.
yeah, I agree, and some of that might depend on whether, does it encumber Amy's reserve fund, does she sort of is expecting to get that back, and, so I think the November 12th meeting is the right day to figure that out. So.
Yeah, that'll be an opportunity to have a lot of the interested parties in the same room to discuss some potential uses and the pros and cons to each of those
Right.
options.
Are there restrooms on the lower part of that house, or? Because
I
we
don't
don't
know.
have, I mean, I think that's always been something, well, it's been something that's been brought up with people attending Schanda Park activities, so there's no public restroom nearby.
Space, yeah. I don't know, because I haven't been in it, but
Okay.
we'll mention that.
It's 2 bedrooms and it's very tiny.
Okay.
On the inside.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all I've heard. I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the considerations that Bart and I were talking about with the potential for subdivision and resale of the house itself is that it would, it's already a very small lot, so it would be even smaller in that instance, and it would be non-conforming. So we have to understand the process of, we would likely need to apply for a zoning waiver, and there are more things to figure out to understand if that's even an option, a path that we could take.
I'm hoping that the people who will be attending that November meeting will actually go into the house and get some ideas about its possible use or not.
Most of Amy's been in it
closings.
several times.
Mhm, okay.
Town manager's also been through it,
Okay.
and I don't know if Bart has gone as well, but some town departments have gone through to evaluate that. Public Works, true, they've gone, I think Karen Bloom, the Buildings and Grounds Superintendent, she would need to manage the property if the town's gonna own it, so she's been through it too, so. Some people have, I just haven't, because there's
Okay.
no specific need to send me
Right,
through.
at this point, yeah.
Yeah.
Because some of those other functions, restrooms or any of those things, there's going to be considerable space around that pump station if you shrink it down. So I could imagine that even though it's nice to have that piece of property to work with there, it might be more cost effective to get what value you can out of that dwelling, use it as is, and then, any money that you've saved from that might well be applied to things that you're doing around the pump station, maybe a more suitable. Anyways, you guys will figure it out. I'll leave it at that.
I wonder, like, if you could even use making the other lot as like an open space offset, because I think like my entire development, I think, is non-conforming lots because of the open space aspect.
Yeah.
Could
Do you mean the space that we would keep?
Yeah, like
For-
you
yeah.
subdivide it off and give part back.
It's a small, awkwardly shaped
Yeah.
piece, and that was kind of why we were talking about potentially doing the lot line adjustment rather than a straight-up subdivision, because it's very small to subdivide
Yeah.
a small piece into 2 smaller pieces. So subdividing or doing the lot line adjustment would mean that we would basically just transfer a portion of the property into the Creighton Street pump station property parcel.
I think just a question for general, or was there anything specified about use of the parcel because of the rec funds, or is it just it has to have some sort of recreational adjacent purpose?
I don't think there are stipulations onto the specific use of it for it's, the hope is that because we're using those recreational funds, it's for that, but that this was an avenue that we could take where the land purchase could actually take place, because there are various funds that are authorized to be used for land purchases. I think in general, it's for the larger town benefit, so the use is kind of flexible.
I mean, I think that's great news, because obviously that gives options for infrastructure work, both at the pump station and takes away the, let's call it like 50 consecutive feet of private ownership that was
Yeah.
impeding the town's ownership from Schanda all the way down to the boat launch. So it definitely opens up some options, and I'm glad that the town ultimately chose to pursue it.
Yep, me too.
Any more, I guess, discussion on the house at this time, or I can give an update after we meet on the 12th, and just let people know what we talked about? Okay. What about for the actual coastal resilience zone? Was there any actual discussion about anything? Was there any curiosities, or just it can't hurt, so we'll implement it?
No, there's other parts to that RSA that deal with affordable housing or whatever, and I think
Yeah.
there was more discussion about the other parts that aren't included in what we approved than
Yep.
there was about the coastal resilience zone. But is there something you want to say? I mean, other than I'll say Bart took away some action item, and basically he's going to write up something about, what it is that you can do within the coastal resilient zone. But, other than that, really, no, there wasn't much discussion on the town council part.
Yeah, I did attend. I saw your email, Sam, and I
Okay.
attended. I think it's the same thing you're saying, Joe, but the way somebody raised the objection is they didn't really understand how that, one of the councils raised the objection that he didn't understand how that would actually, needed to see concrete examples. What could people do?
Sure.
What would be an example that would use this? And, they had them very, very broad, but in the end, it was pointed out that you had to, really a lot of that stuff does have to come after the approval. And that's what Steve pointed out. We need the approval, then we can convene and start giving examples and get more specific. But it seems kind of backwards, I think, in some ways, but the approval has to come first, and then you get into a more detailed explanation of what that might mean.
Yeah, the first step is establishing the zone, and that was what town council voted and approved, and that was what Bart relayed that I made note of specifically, so I said it correctly. This town council passed the coastal resilience incentive zone as presented, no modification. So that was the map that he brought here previously that outlined where the zone would be applied to. So that's step one, that's been approved. So now that we know where the zone can be applied in the RSA, there is some flexibility in what projects can be considered eligible and how to develop the application for property owners to bring that forward. So the next step is for Bart and we've started to have some discussions about what that looks like. And we had been informed that Rye was the only other New Hampshire community that had done this, but I actually reached out to Kim Reed at Rye to ask her some questions about their zone, and she said they don't in fact have the
What are you
coastal
talking
resilience
about?
incentive zone. They did update their land use regulations with a section that is specific to coastal resilience and adaptation as a consideration in land development and redevelopment. So they've sort of done it, but not this same route that's specifically outlined in this RSA. So we have some ongoing conversations with Kim and Rye to get an understanding of how they apply it in which areas and what kind of data they use to qualify or to identify the criteria that can be used in evaluating applications that come in. So we'll work on developing an application and that application criteria, and have a goal of presenting a draft at possibly the December meeting. So we'll work on that draft and kind of vet some of the options so that, I'm going to say Bart can come and present that because that's more his wheelhouse. But
he'll present it to us first?
Yes.
Okay, that's
and
good.
that would be an opportunity to review the application and the criteria before, and that would have to go through public hearing and be adopted by town council. And to the counselor's question about how it gets implemented, any application under this would have to go directly to town council for review and approval and determination on the incentive. So that's where the Riverfront Committee has an opportunity to help shape the application and the consideration of review criteria in what projects will apply. And then town council will be the ultimate decision on whether or not an application is approved and receives that incentive.
So, so my thought or my vision was that, there'd be some kind of application that somebody would do. They would fill out whatever. It would go to you and Bart. You guys would kind of like look at it, and yes, this meets the criteria and whatever. And maybe you make some kind of recommendation that, to the council about whether to approve it or not, and maybe even suggest what the, the tax money, might be.
That probably will happen. That's where I'll defer more to Bart,
Yeah,
because that's his wheelhouse and how that process goes.
That packet would come to the town council. The town council would look at it, ask questions, and say.
Yeah, and I think in addition to internal staff reviews, it would also be important for the Riverfront Committee to have a review opportunity, and potentially at whatever council meeting an application is being reviewed, you guys have a representative. You'll be, assuming you're still on the council, and the council will have a representative from the committee, but if you have opportunity for Sam as the chair or another Riverfront representative to attend those meetings and provide Riverfront Committee input, that would be a good time to do it too.
That's good, yeah.
That's good. The other thing that's interesting, going back, because in my memory of how we got to the point when we were talking about the zone, the resilience zone, we had a very broad zone that we could select areas from. But essentially that means right now, when you see a map of where the zone is, it's very broad. I mean, I live, over on Smith Garrison, that area down there, there's almost nothing public over there, or public use, but it's on there. So I think people that see the map and trying to understand, it'll be important for people to understand, because it took a while. I think Steve really brought it home, that this is really going to be the clear definition here is, it can't be, my land is being impacted by climate change. It's got to be some public
Benefit.
use or benefit requires an adaptation to climate. And so a lot of the areas that are in that coastal area, that zone, probably aren't really places where a project, I can't imagine one now coming from some of the areas that are in that. Because I don't think we had a lot of discussion where we said, all right, this is it, this is the only part that will count.
Yeah,
We just said,
haven't got there yet.
make it broad.
I can see a case where, I actually know a condo association, they have two things. They have to redo their parking lot. They're right on the river, and there's a retaining wall that they have to fix at some point in time. I mean, if they can make it so that, yes, we're preventing runoff from going into the river, whatever, to me, that maybe meets the criteria. So even though it's private property, there is a public benefit in preventing stormwater or whatever from going into the river, going directly in the stormwater drains and whatever.
Yeah, I think that when you get to those points, it gets into the amount of public benefit, what's required of the condo association I think all of that will factor into those kind of decisions.
And even Rivermore, if they were to redo their back parking lot there or whatever, preventing runoff from going to the river, that, I think that, to me, that might qualify too.
Yeah, and I think that's why, like, the whole purpose of pushing something like this forward is it allows the town to have conversations like that.
Right, that's
Can we
what,
get
that's.
stuff done. Yeah, can we get
It's in
these
their
projects
court.
done? Yep. Okay.
So those are the two things that Bart and I prepped on before coming here, so
Okay.
I'm happy to answer additional questions if I can, but I think that's what I had for update, and the rest I can kind of chime in as things come up and discussion of the action items.
Yeah, my only thought in the note that I just kind of wrote for myself is, I feel like in New Hampshire, obviously, by the size of our seacoast, we're limited in the number of, I guess, adjacent communities that would have implemented something like this. So, like, obviously, it wouldn't be referencing the same RSA, but I wonder if there isn't, like, a comparable analog in Massachusetts that might exist, or even Maine. So I wrote a note for myself because I can talk to a few people as well, potentially, to see if something like that exists. But yeah, if Rye hasn't truly done it, and we might actually be the first, what other info do we have to pull on? And that's where I was wondering if potentially our neighbors actually might have something similar.
Yep.
So I don't mind pulling that strand a little bit myself too.
Okay.
Does anyone have any further questions on either the Criz or the Creighton Street parcel? You look like you do, Dale.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out, I have had major mail, Google calendar issues, so I can't see a lot of my calendar, but did we pick a date for our November meeting yet?
We haven't, and I feel like, again, per interval. Can you help me, Lindsay? Is November 10th an observed holiday for the town?
November 11th.
11th is Veterans Day.
Veterans Day is usually on Veterans Day.
It's on
Yes.
Veterans
Monday.
Day, so the
Yeah.
10th technically would be, okay.
And you didn't need to hold it after you had your November 12th meeting, or does it matter?
Well, I guess that would be open for question of, do we want to do it the 17th so that I could provide an update on what was talked about the 12th? Like, to me, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it does to me too.
Let me check my calendar real quick, make sure I'm not making a gaffe, but
The next Monday would be the 17th.
yeah, so, yeah, do it at Monday, November 17th at 4. That looks okay on my part. So yeah, I think we can kind of plan on that. Yeah, that's actually something we've been talking about off and on for the last few weeks, is trying to get this meeting set up, but there's a lot of different people involved, and so it just kind of like every time we had a date, that's what we were joking about with it just kind of kept getting pushed further and further and further. But yeah, I think now that that date actually is locked in, doing it on the 17th kind of makes a lot of sense. So the only other agenda item that I had, when we met in September, we kind of revisited our, implementation table from the Riverfront chapter. Basically, maybe not fully what's going to get approved, at the planning board level, but kind of where we left it, with a more detailed listing of all the stuff we kind of talked about and noted, and ended up in our, implementation checklist, for lack of a better term. So when we talked in September, I think some of it was to identify if there was certain things people had a little bit of interest in pulling further. Maybe both as a group, but also like, individually, if there's things that people will say like, yeah, I don't mind trying to get involved with that, or talking to other folks in town and seeing if we can move that, either town staff, things like that. So like a couple examples, like I can start to, maybe more say what's on my mind about like the two items that I kind of put at the top of my list over the last month has been, one of the other items that would like to discuss at that meeting on the 12th is starting to talk about the actual framework of moving Schanda out of Concom and into the town. So obviously that's a decision made by a lot of different parts, but that's something that, we've been talking about kind of adjacently for a year. We've talked about to Concom. I think in broad strokes, there's agreement of that. Well, okay, how does that actually happen? As we're talking about, as a community moving to much larger projects down there, how do we kind of facilitate that transfer, of Schanda Park? Is there wide agreement that should happen, and is there agreement on the town side about how that actually looks, like the logistics of that? So like that's one item I had kind of, marked as something that, I see taking on, and trying to help facilitate, especially as a past Concom member. And then the other item is, I think, with the purchase of that Creighton Street property, and this can be something we talk about at the committee level. It doesn't have to only be me, but like an intentional development of a Southern Riverwalk, or like trail development on the parcel behind the wastewater plant. If it's all town land, if we're looking at, can we now connect Schanda to Pinder's Lane out to the boat launch, and can we do that in a way that the adjacent public likes, that Sean and the wastewater division likes, of keeping people away from their stuff. But like that parcel from when we walked it a couple of years ago doesn't have a lot of developed or defined network outside of just Pinder's Lane. Maybe it should. So that's kind of a thought of, if we talk about expanding the Riverwalk, the exposure of public land down there, and potentially also allowing people to travel straight up from New Road directly into downtown, like more intentionally, without ever setting foot on 108, until they're in the heart of the downtown. That seems like another kind of worthy thing. So I kind of rank those as my, I guess, top two things that I'd like to be involved in moving forward. But I guess I'll pause there. Is there any kind of thought or comment on either of those?
I do. I sort of agree with that, but what I would really like to see is like a master plan. What is it that we want everything to look like? Okay.
Yeah.
Sort of at a high level at this point. Okay, we're going to connect here. We're going to, do a living shoreline here. I don't know. I'd like to see a kind of like an overview plan of what it is that we'd like to do, and then we can start attacking. Okay, if this is how we want it to look. Yes, we need this piece. We need the connectivity piece. We need the development piece. There's the area down behind the Public Works building with it currently that, you have the boat launch there for the fishing game boat launch or whatever. What can we do there?
Yeah.
And again, at a higher level.
So I don't disagree. I'd actually, so my number 3 is actually fishing game coordination, both for that and potentially at the fish ladder as well, of like trying to understand a little more definitively what the guardrails are on those two areas. The only thing that I guess I don't personally know, or how I've been thinking of it, is like, I think we all agree, and that had been one of our like priority goals, was developing like a cohesive plan down there. To me, I've been wondering if the I guess the actual outcome of the Moonlight Brook study stuff and the H&H and like that piece is kind of what's, I don't know if we need to see the outcome of that first to be able to know if some of the things that got talked about at the charrette are actually feasible. Like, I don't know, like, that's how I've been thinking about it, but maybe I'm wrong.
To me, it's, we're at a point now where, you know, with the acquisition of that property, like going back to the charrette, when the things that were talked about for improving Schanda Park with a platform and access over that, a lot of that stuff is improved and really kind of, it opens up to more ideas than even we talked about at the charrette so much, because we didn't spend a lot of time at the charrette that I remember to saying, well, what could you do if you really had access to what's over around the pump station? There's a lot of things that are on the table there, and it's going to have a lot of this is more detailed than that. So I think the exciting thing for us to start to understand as a group is how can we be involved as those are, we take some of what's in the charrette and see whether it's real or not real. And that's certainly what I'm most excited and interested in hearing about. But I think talking a lot more about that before November 12th happens and we meet after that. But that's what I see as, I like the things you mentioned, Sam, like the transfer over to the, transferring that to the town from the Concon. I mean, that makes perfect sense, and I think a lot of people think, yep, that we're going to do that, but it's not been done yet. So I like the idea that's something you can actually execute right now. A lot of this is kind of, I think we need to have a little bit more definition about the possibilities that are inherent in getting access to that land.
And I think this all goes back to, needing to have some short-term projects, some medium-term projects, and long-term projects. I mean, I actually agree with Sam's recommendation on moving the Schanda from the Concom to Public Works. And from a key point is just the whole maintenance of that whole area. Again, there are multiple trip hazards in that brick walk in front of the Lang's Wharf. There are definitely just some basic cleanup issues in front of Schanda Park. It's really nothing to look at anymore. And, it's really a shame, because I think with some just general cleaning up, but again, who's responsible for that? And then if we move it into Public Works, do they have the staff? And do they have the funds? I mean, and as Lindsay just said, if you're agreeing, as Lindsay just said, now Public Works is going to be responsible for the Creighton Street project as well. I just feel like there's a lot of maintenance issues that need to be addressed, and probably not enough money, definitely not enough staff. So, and I just feel it's challenging when you say, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to expand the Riverwalk in this way, and we're going to have, platforms over Moonlight Brook, and, and it all just goes back to, why can't we just take care of what we've got first? So again, having a long-term plan, but if you start making small improvements and people see them, that's how you buy, in my opinion, that's how you buy the public interest, and saying, it's now nice to be there, and you see what they're doing, and maintaining what's there, and people get excited about it. They buy into the project, so.
The town council had a budget workshop this past weekend, and I specifically asked Rick about that, the maintenance down by Schanda and that walkway there.
Yeah.
And specifically, basically what he said, at this point, yeah, he feels that he's responsible for like minor things, like, fix a brick or whatever here, but for anything major down there, it hasn't been officially assigned to him at this point, I guess. And he thinks that, that's, the money to do all that is not in this upcoming year's budget, so it'll be I
For
think.
2027 is what?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we have to make a good
Push.
push for,
Mhm.
hey, you've got to do this, you've got to take over this, and there should be
Mhm.
money in the budget
Mhm.
for the 27 year to do
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, and I mean, from my time on Concom, there is a Schanda Park dedicated fund
Mhm.
under Concom. It's not extensive, but there is a little bit too, and that could be another
Yeah.
part of discussion for that is, does that get transferred ultimately to the town to help with some of these initial things or
Well,
not?
I think that could be an example of, just from the standpoint of us looking at it, is to go down there and say, okay, we don't want to make any big improvements because we know this is all going to change.
Mhm.
But what is not an improvement, what is really maintenance and safety? What has to be done, because it could be easily 4 or 5 years before that really starts to get transformed in the kind of ways we're talking about. Things that can't wait because they're safety, they need to be,
Yeah.
fit to walk. Those things should be identified and talk about those are, to Betsy's point, those need to happen soon and should happen soon. And the other things, but we're not making significant changes that are really need to see what the long-term plan is before you did tackle any of it. And that could be something that's kind of a goal, and it's not really fitting with this, because this is master plan, this is all kind of looking long-term out, but if, it might be that that's something we can help look at and get some input on it, I don't know if that's something you'd want to do, Betsy, or something like that.
I think it's related, and I think that's a short-term goal that we should really work on is, getting responsibilities all squared away.
Yeah.
Another thing, if I could just add, is that for Moonlight Brook, I think, I think there's assumptions that we can make. We can assume that, there's going to be an outflow from Moonlight Brook, and there's probably going to be some kind of a bridge that lets light through, whatever, and maybe some kind of, living shoreline in there or something. But we can make assumptions, and as we plan for the larger world of what everything's going to look like.
Right. We're not, we're talking about maintenance versus improvement. We're not going to replace those culverts or anything associated with that in the near term, but it's likely that that's really going to change in there. So the path through there might require some TLC or something. I think that's the kind of thing you got to lay eyes on and see what's safe, what's not safe. How do we bridge the gap until the point where? But I agree with you, Sam. I think for the purposes of what we're doing, which is just kind of looking at it and trying to identify priorities, we can make assumptions like that. Even if they're wrong, all we've done is spend some committee time saying, well, if this is true and it's going to take that long before we get to that, then these things should happen sooner, and those things can wait as part of the planning process. And kind of focus that effort, that part of the effort can focus right in Schanda Park. Talking about future uses of I think it was like the ice fishing launch, really was down the boat launch down there. Those pieces of properties, what kind of ideas we might bring in from the public, because Sean will have ideas, but we could also have ideas about how that big piece of land could best be utilized, and just start to represent what might be well received by the public and what our idea might be for some of those parts of it. I think it would be just preliminary. I think a lot of stakeholders in the town are going to be interested in all that rolls out, but we certainly, that's a big part of what our mandate is as well, and we'll be interested in that. But tackling what Sam said, I'd help too, Betsy, if you wanted to look at some of that maintenance stuff together. We could do that. We could have a meeting down there and say, and try to just get some thoughts.
Yeah, I'd be glad to come.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to go through there every once in a while when showing a friend around town.
Yeah, yeah.
Say, one of my responsibilities, look at this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'd support that as kind of like a yeah, a short-term, just like maintenance plan or whatever, then we have something concrete that we're actually, discussing or handing to the town to execute, but like, hey, this and how.
Well, at least be feedback to the town, input to the town, a little more, get a little more specific in these areas, because it's starting to take shape, what might happen there. Some big things have happened about what might happen there. And we know a little bit more about what the time frame for the big things to happen. And then we can start to say, okay, well, what requires a little more than minimal to feel like you're actually maintaining it as a safe park for the next few years?
So before we leave the conversation of, I guess, the master plan piece, how do you see that moving forward, or like what is our process? Do we, not necessarily saying, but saying like rhetorically, do we want to, does everyone come with their own thoughts and then compare notes? Do we want to try to make something and, as a group, like, how do we kind of want to start that? Because I don't know if we all necessarily would agree right off on what is included or what components or potentially like where. So almost maybe doing it separately and then seeing where the overlap is useful.
Yeah, I don't see anything in here that I oppose to. I see a lot of things that I don't feel like, we the committee are going to drive that. Hosting pop-up events in Schanda Park, such as, There's a lot of things here I don't disagree with at all. I think it may, getting a further prioritization beyond this is really hard at this point. We're still trying to imagine what the impact of the purchase is and how all of this is going to fit. And I don't know that anything much further is going to happen around these things right away, other than putting them in the master plan.
Are we looking to consolidate this list somehow and prioritize certain things? Is that?
My takeaway was, look at this and what can we work on as a group over the next couple of months or a year. I kind of like categorized a couple of things with signage. Probably something we could work on, but then I heard they're already working on signage. They already have plans.
Bart and the town manager are putting out an RFP, looking to get some assistance in developing a wayfinding branding kind of process that would be similar to what some of the cities around us have done, Dover, Rochester, Portsmouth, not specific to Riverfront, but parking.
In general.
Economic development in general, and it would be using some available economic development funds. So the process has started. I don't think there's anybody on board yet. I don't think it's fully started, or underway, but there will be somebody on board to help provide some guidance in developing that.
So does it make sense for us to do anything at this point related to signage?
I would say as the committee, not specific activities that you can advance independent of that, but as a part of that process, once we have a
Once they
contractor.
start.
Yeah, then it would be important to stay kind of plugged into that project as it goes forward.
So, go ahead.
Well, one question I have with that though too is that there is a lot of inconsistencies with signage throughout the town already. Are we looking to rebrand, define something, and keep it moving forward? I mean, we've got some signs that are, green and brown, and sometimes that are blue, and sometimes they have sans serif print, and sometimes they, and it's a hodgepodge.
It is a hodgepodge. My understanding is that it would be kind of a rebrand.
Okay,
so that the signage and the wayfinding and the maps that go along with it are all tied together and are easily identifiable and kind of have the same look throughout town, regardless of what you're looking to find.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, it's a nice look. I spent some time in like Bridgeton, Maine recently, and like they have like very coordinated signage, and it's like, yeah, it's a nice touch to just kind of navigate a community.
Okay, so that's something definitely that I think we can work on, but obviously they're gonna, or we can be involved with, but nothing actively at this point. But again, though, I don't know, I feel if we had a broad idea of what it is that we want to do, like, you know, how all the pieces tie together. I don't know, I'm not wording it very correctly. What's in my brain doesn't always come out of my mouth.
I feel like, I guess this is my input, rather than working on this list more at this time, unless there's some, because I wouldn't have any problem with this going in. If this had to go in the master plan, if that's what's going to happen with it, I think it's good enough for now. It identifies the kind of things we're talking about. Getting more specific or trying to get in more finer grained than that, I feel like...
What can we work on? What can we do as a group?
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. If we did, Sam came up with a couple of things. Betsy talked about that. If we actually executed on those, there's probably 3 things that are mixed in there, and some of them are pretty big. And they would be useful to have some input, very useful to have some input as to what we think can wait until we're executing the master plan, and what we might start talking about as a group about seeing where we can, what the plans are of the town to address those as an interim to get us to the bigger point. If we did those things in the next 4 or 6 weeks, that's pretty good.
I mean, again, I think to what you're saying, Joe, if we look at things and say, okay, let's get this done within 3 years, period. And so we get the Schanda Park passed over now to Public Works? Can we get Public Works to get more money? Can we get a maintenance plan in place? And then with wayfinding, where we've got the signage already started, what can be least expensive wayfinding to start with, to then encourage people, like have a QR code down at Schanda Park that lets them know what events are coming up through the summer, who's playing when. Have something that brings the Riverwalk down to, to the southern end of it, and expands and stuff, with information about coastal resiliency and plantings and things like that. Maybe even lookout points as you go around to see what's at the end. So I think you have these small little bits that then further work to, so we have the signs, then we can, and make these smaller, less expensive sort of things, then you can go into having that longer term plan where you're actually developing, like say we want to do an actual lookout point up, along the river at the south end that's coming up high, then you can start with just a sign to say this is where you might see eagles, and then have that go into a platform that's developed or something like that. So I feel like, you have things that you do within the next 3 years, and then you have things that are you plan between years 3 to 5, and then implement 5 to 10, that sort of a thing. So.
Yes, but if you have that, this is what we can do in 3 years, this is what you can do in 5 years, but if you put that all together, you have a big picture of what it's all gonna look like when you're done.
Exactly.
That's what I'd like to see, is what's the big picture gonna look like?
Right. But I think one of those things that we have to do too is that as you look through some of these items that we've identified, there are definitely things that we can do now. And then the big picture things, there's actually a lot in there for the larger picture, but I think what we need to do is also have a plan, and not so much the 5 of us develop it, but have like an actual landscape architect or somebody to take us to that next step. As to what, like, can we cover Moonlight Brook, and what will that look like? We might not be able to do that right away, but we can prep for that space. Do you know what I mean? So.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Wording it right.
Well,
But-
so can
I was gonna say, if we have the big picture,
Right.
a drawing or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
Fill in, here we're gonna have a living shoreline.
Right.
We're gonna connect from Schanda Park to here.
Yes.
That's all on the big map or whatever.
Right.
Then we can say, okay, this piece we can do now.
Mm-hmm.
Moonlight Brook, obviously that's, a couple of years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
We have all that land behind you know, the water treatment plant.
Mhm.
What can we do there? I don't know, we can talk about, okay, we've got this big area, you know, it's on the map, what can we do with that? And so, Heron Point, I don't know. Another thing, I'll just throw out whatever. To me, kind of like in my mind now that we have that property and we can expand going south, maybe it negates the need to walk for the river walk behind Rivermore Landing there too, you know. The connection to Heron Point becomes less, I don't know, of a need to me. You know, we have a better option going south, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but.
Or do we then, you know, make a recommendation to the town to pursue, you know, possible easements through
Well, I think
that
we still-
property that will allow easier access?
I
you know?
think we still want to do that, or
Absolutely.
maybe if we have that big picture and we look at the big picture and say, you know, if we put our efforts here expanded down south, we don't, you know, this is less of a priority for us, and, you know, we can work on that later on.
So I think the big picture is kind of taking the elements that were identified in the charrette, because there was talk of the bridge, there was talk of connectivity, there was talk of boat launcher, docking stuff. All of those elements are in there. I think the big picture is in the charrette, maybe just not all on one map at this time. And that could be.
I think it is. I think, you know, basically taking that picture of that map in the charrette and us filling in the pieces, okay, here I want to do this, here we'd like to, we envision doing this.
So that's where you can envision doing something, but we're not at a point where we can say this is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. We have a big picture, like a map, whatever, and say, I envision a living shoreline here. I envision, you know, connectivity
Well,
from here to there.
even the living shoreline here, we're not sure if here is the right spot, aside from just saying a big broad Schanda Park. But like, where is Schanda Park? Those are the things we don't have enough information to say yet. We're gonna do, particularly with this property purchase, we need to get survey information and know what currently exists in the big picture before we can decide what's gonna turn into anything else or what needs to be modified.
Okay, again, doesn't always come out of my mouth. But again, when I say, you know, we envision, this is what we envision, and then you have to say, okay, what can we do? And then if you say, oh, we envision a living shoreline here, you know, right in front of the pumping station, and then somebody says, well, no, you can't do it there, blah, 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 blah. You know,
So you're kind of saying that vision has options of things that can go in places that you're.
yeah, it's a very large picture or vision of what we would ultimately like, and some things are not going to be doable. Some things we can do in a short term, some things are going to take years, and they're going to be dependent upon other things. You know, I think Moonlight Brook obviously is a significant piece of, we don't know how it's going to work out, but, you know we want to do something, connectivity from here to there, and we're going to need some kind of connectivity over Moonlight Brook, whatever. Our vision is, you know, connectivity from Schanda Park going south.
I agree with, I understand, I think I understand what you're asking for. I don't disagree with any of it. I think for the purposes of what we're doing right now, though, if we talk about the things that we could say, well, this would be useful if we did it right now, we had the 3 or 4 things. Everything else will be clarified a little bit after the November 12th meeting. So the next meeting will be, we may have more insight into what the timing is and what some of that is, to try to get some more detail around that. Is that?
Again, we can assume that we're going to have some kind of connectivity from Schanda Park going south through that property now.
What do you feel we need to do before the November 12th meeting happens?
I guess I would like to have a picture of what everything's going to, you know, what we envision. If I had a picture of what we envision, then it's easier for me to say, okay, we need signage for here, or, you know, we want to do a living shoreline here. is it actually feasible to do a living shoreline here?
Are those maps that we've had before something that you can work from? We've gotten the maps multiple times.
Yeah, I think there was
Is it just
actually
worth a review of looking at that map?
there was a
And
study
charrette?
or something that
Yeah,
was done
right.
even before the charrette, or I think it was brought into the charrette that had a picture of what.
Yeah, I didn't bring my binder with
Well,
me
the
and say
living,
which date we
we
got.
had the living shoreline study way back at the beginning of when we got started. And they had a fairly detailed, but the limitation of that is using that as a map is when we first met with that group, then we had to say, well, what area do you want us to work with? And we didn't know anything down to Cradient Station. That area was entirely excluded from that discussion. A lot has changed that much since then. A lot of that living shoreline plan is usable and informative, but I think you know, it's not something that it's going to guide us that much at this point in time. It will inform a lot of what we do in terms of planning. The real opportunity that to me, and the exciting opportunity from what could really help the town, is to do things down below. You know, the whole working sewer plant, pump station, that part of the shoreline down through there. Some of that, I mean, the image I have is I took a ride near the end of the summer and came up through there on quite a high tide. My goodness, that pump station, you know, you're going through there, you could step right off at high tide, the sea level is right there. There is a great need of resiliency work to protect the town's investment that you want to understand a lot of things around that before you pick where the living shoreline will go and what the limit of the living shoreline is.
Again, if we say, in my mind, if I say, this would make a nice area for a living shoreline, and then it may, you know, we draw that on the picture, and then we stop looking at it, and we find out, oh, well, you really can't do that there. I don't know. I guess in my mind, I would like to have a nice picture of what
I think
we
that's
are.
the big,
would like to
that's
get
the
to.
big work for about the next 1 to 2 years is what you're asking for. So,
Actually, I think what we're looking to do stuff shorter than 1 to 2 years. But,
Yeah, so I mean, that is the goal, like, that is the medium to long term, and I understand what you're saying of, like, there's no reason you can't draw something now. I think personally, just why I see it as like a medium thing is I think the town has some choices to make about how they see and what is a priority to the town. Like, so my brain always goes to infrastructure just because that's my day job, but like down there, like, does Sean want to move the pump station back? Is that beneficial to the town and the system? By extension, if you do that, how does it affect the gravity main to the pump station? How does that affect its passage through the land bridge in Schanda, i.e. what choices are there for the Moonlight Brook and so, like, to me, like, that's where, like, I think the town as an entity has to figure out what is important to it, and I don't think November 12th is the time we're going to do that, but I also think, like, that conversation probably, like, needs to be happening.
The conversation on November 12th will help guide what we are looking into and putting some focus and energy on for those discussions as we start to develop that picture.
Yeah, because, like, again, I think just, like, money aside, like, yeah, move the pump station back, elevate the Moonlight Brook platform to make more park space, open up improved water quality through the Moonlight Brook channel, do a living shoreline all along Creighton Street. Like, sounds great. Can that happen? I don't know.
$6 million short.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I've asked Sean several times about the Craig Street pump station. Can we make it obsolete over his dead body?
Yeah.
right, well, I had a conversation with
Yeah.
Sean, and there was conversation about pushing it back.
Because it may
Getting
help
it
for
out.
resiliency if you moved it up, especially
Right.
with the new parcel. Like, you have more choices now.
Right.
More options.
You know, if you get the pump station up, it's safe. Then the land near the water doesn't need to be totally protected from flooding every few years. That, you can make it resilient to being flooded, even if it is going to be flooded. So, and that's a lot of complexity in figuring all that out. That's why we have some good conceptual drawings already. We can have some maps. We can start to get working on those, but that's still quite, you know.
Well, maybe that starts with us right now and say, hey, Sean, we would like you to do this.
I'd like to hear what their starting position is from a group that has applied some expert engineering to saying this is what we do, and then you can have a conversation about their first pass at it. I think it would be more useful more useful of our time, you know. And those things are all going to be important. We're going to be getting enough of them, I think, pretty soon, you know. Relative to where we've been, some of these things, the pace will start to pick up. But it's still a whole lot, you know, when it comes to where does the money come from, it's a lot easier to spend the money on some of these aesthetics if you've got 3 reasons to do it. We got to protect it from coastal damage. We got to do that. This all has to be redesigned. We have to build a new pedestrian bridge anyways because it was failing. Oh, but we can, you know. So there are a lot of infrastructure parts to this that have multiple reasons to happen, and the more reasons it has to happen, the more likely it will happen, and then you infuse that with the aesthetics that we're talking about, and I think it will be a good plan, but it won't be done in a month or two. So.
No, agreed. I think any individual component of any of these things, it may be tough to get through, but if they're all together and all in service of an actual vision that helps the town, then it might be a thing.
I think it's going to be great when it gets done. I think there's a lot of things that will make that area, it's clearly so important to the town. I think it's going to be really great. But that's why I go back to what Betsy's idea was. If there were things, if you start to think about what the realistic time frame, and I pressed Lindsay for that. We had a conversation not too long ago. When do you think some of this might actually see a shovel, you know, that kind of thing? Then it does come back and, well, okay, without spending a lot of money, how can we improve Schanda Park in the interim, those interim steps? And
I mean, even if you just look at where those lattice bus station, you know, used to be right in the downtown, and those were just taken down, and the park was just, you know, that little park was just cleaned up a little bit, you know. That made a big improvement, you know, kind of opened up that space.
Right.
So again, and, you know, was it rebuilding those? No, it was the town actually looking at it and saying, you know, they really don't need to be here anymore, so let's just remove them. And
quick, easy makes a difference.
exactly, yeah.
So where do we stand?
So I think in short term, I think the master plan thing is a worthy exercise, and that might be as soon as, like, you know, the next meeting or the December meeting. Like, again, like, all right, why don't we all just talk about what we see and how much overlap is there? What is the grand vision? You know, all other considerations aside. And then in terms of, I guess, shorter term actions, you know, again, I think that the November 12th meeting hopefully is good. I'd like to work on facilitating an actual transfer of Schanda, and if that is ready to proceed at this time. I like the idea of the maintenance plan, like, okay, like, not only that, but like what could be attacked first. So I think those are some good, I guess, short-term goals, maybe working on the defining what the actual CRIZ is. I'm happy to reach out internally and see if people smarter than me know what Mass does, and if there is some comparable stuff there. But I guess a broader behind the scenes thing, which I know you and Bart are already on, but it's just, what does the town see as important? Because I think those fundamental questions, especially about the infrastructure down there, kind of have to be first and foremost. and having a better understanding of what the town either wants or is willing to do with those, I think makes our conversations easier
Yep.
and more accurate.
You know, another part to this, again, and I don't think we're gonna decide it there, it doesn't fit in here, but I think, and I'm sure Bart's on it, because he's really good at this stuff, but there's gonna have to be maybe not another charrette, but there's going to have to be some forums where some of this stuff starts to be put in a place where people can come and see it and talk about it, so that knowledge, I mean, it could be a meeting, it could be an expanded meeting here, something where we get early and very preliminary and maybe not even particularly informed areas that remap and draw the area that the town has down there. That might be a year away, for all I know. I don't know when that would make sense, but that's going to be a part of it, is, because a lot of the town is unaware we have this property.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
It's all
absolutely.
new to it, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's going to be something that's important to start to widen the conversation. I think the charrette did a great job at doing that. I think it's going to be, things are going to happen faster now, so, you know, ways to bring the public into that is going to be a good idea.
Don't disagree. Okay. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to discuss? So we will meet on Monday the 17th, November 17th at 4.
Would it be difficult if we look at December as well, with the holidays and things like that?
Nope. Makes sense.
And establish this December meeting date as well?
Right now, we're scheduled for December 8th.
Be the 8th.
I won't be able to attend the 8th.
The 15th is the first day of Hanukkah, if that
Yeah.
makes any difference to anyone.
Is Hanukkah a problem? I don't have any problem, because that will give us a little more time between, if you want to try to do it on the 15th, it's okay with me, and I don't know that we have anybody here that Hanukkah would be a problem for, but if so, please say so. And otherwise,
The 15th is fine with me.
It's okay with me, too.
I think it's fine. I don't see any reason it's not.
yeah. We can, Sam, maybe you could propose it to Bart. Bart's going to be important to have in some of these, so, as well, even though you guys are a team.
Bart will be keeping.
You did an admirable Bart impression. Yeah, I think definitely committed to Monday the 17th, just because it makes more sense to be the interval after potentially that meeting on the 12th.
For the November meeting.
Yeah, without pushing too close to actual Thanksgiving. But yeah, 12:15, we can kind of email Bart and see if that looks like it works for him before kind of
Okay.
committing to that.
Yeah,
We'll start thinking that way.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Yes.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.